He stood on stage with a smirk, sunglasses on, chewing gum, full of attitude. Reporters surrounded him, microphones in his face, cameras flashing non-stop. This was supposed to be his big moment. The young up-and-comer finally getting a chance to fight JakePaul, one of the most talked-about names in combat sports. But instead of showing respect, he went for attention. "JakePaul," he said with a laugh, adjusting his shades. "Man, that dude's old news. He fights like a grandpa. I'm going to send him straight into retirement." The room erupted with laughter. Even some reporters chuckled. It was the headline moment he wanted, and he knew it. Clips of him calling JakePaul grandpa spread across social media within hours. Memes, TikToks, reactions, everyone was talking about it. But while the young fighter was enjoying the spotlight, JakePaul was silent. No response, no tweets, no interviews. Just calm. That silence made people nervous. Because if there's one thing everyone knows about JakePaul, it's that when he goes quiet, something's coming. Meanwhile, the challenger kept pushing. In another interview, he mocked Jake's age, his training, even his career. "He's just a YouTuber pretending to be a boxer," he said with a smirk. "He's too slow now. I'm going to knock him out in 2 rounds, maybe less." The arrogance was unbelievable. The media loved it. But boxing fans? They'd seen this before. Loudmouths who underestimate experience. Behind the scenes, Jake's team was watching every clip. His coach just shook his head. He doesn't know what he started. Jake didn't bother to clap back. Instead, he hit the gym harder. Earlier mornings. Longer rounds. He didn't train to prove people wrong. He trained to remind them who he really was. And as the fight date got closer, the world started choosing sides. Would youth and arrogance win? Or would experience and discipline silence the noise once again? What this cocky fighter didn't know was that JakePaul had a surprise waiting for him in round 1 that would change everything. The press conference the next week looked more like a circus than a sports event. Reporters packed the room shoulder to shoulder, the crowd buzzing with anticipation. The challenger walked in first, grinning from ear to ear, cameras flashing around him like fireworks. Then JakePaul entered, calm, expressionless, wearing a plain grey hoodie. No theatrics, no jokes. Just focus. The challenger couldn't resist. He pointed at Jake from across the stage. "There he is." "Grandpa Jake! Someone get this man his vitamins." The crowd laughed. Even some of Jake's critics smirked. But Jake didn't blink. He just sat down, leaned into the mic and said quietly, "You'll find out soon enough who the real old man is." That one line hit harder than a punch. The challenger rolled his eyes, pretending not to care. But the mood shifted. Jake's calmness wasn't weakness. It was control. Reporters fired questions like rapid bullets. "Jake, how do you respond to being called grandpa? Do you think you still have what it takes to fight a younger man?" Jake didn't raise his voice. He looked straight into the cameras and said, "I've been doubted before. I've been disrespected before. And every single time I let my fists do the talking. Saturday night will be no different. That was all. No insults, no shouting, just quiet confidence." The challenger laughed again, shaking his head. "Bro, you're gonna need a walking stick after I'm done with you." Jake didn't even look at him. He smiled slightly, a cold, knowing smile. And that made the younger fighter's grin falter for just a second. Over the next few days, the challenger took over social media. Clips of him training, taunting, dancing with grandpa captions flooded TikTok and Instagram. Every post was meant to get under Jake's skin. "I'm young, fast, hungry, and he's just old," the challenger bragged in an interview. Meanwhile, Jake was completely silent. No response. No hype videos, nothing. People started noticing. Where's JakePaul? Why isn't he talking? Is he scared? Maybe this new guy's actually gonna end him. The silence became its own mystery, fueling the fire even more, and that's when things really started heating up. The official weigh-in came next. The challenger tried to get in Jake's face, shouting insults, flexing, trying to break his focus. But Jake didn't move. Not a single flinch. He just stared straight into the kid's eyes with the calm intensity of someone who's already seen the outcome. You could feel the energy in the room. The kind that says something. Explosive is about to happen. Who do you think will win, the loudmouth or the legend? Drop your answer in the comments and tell me. Which country or city are you watching this story from? I love seeing how far JakePaul's name reaches. After the weigh-in, Jake quietly walked backstage. His team followed close behind. "Man, he's really pushing it," one of his trainers said. Jake unwrapped his gloves, looked up and said calmly, "Good. The more he talks, the harder he'll fall." Those around him smiled. They'd seen that look before. It was the same look Jake had before every big win. Meanwhile, the challenger couldn't stop himself. He posted one more video just 24 hours before the fight. In it, he wore a gray wig, pretending to limp like an old man, mocking Jake's walkout routine. The caption read, "Tomorrow night, Grandpa gets put to bed." Millions laughed. But some fans warned him in the comments, "You're playing with fire. You don't disrespect a man like JakePaul. He's gonna humble you bad." The challenger ignored them all. He thought it was his era, his moment. He didn't realize that behind Jake's silence was a storm ready to explode. The countdown was on. The world waited. And in just one night, the truth would be revealed inside the ring. Because when the bell finally rang, that grandpa everyone laughed at was about to teach the young man a lesson he'd never forget. JakePaul vanished from the spotlight after that press conference. No interviews, no jokes, no posts. But what he was doing behind the scenes would shock everyone who thought he was finished. After that wild press conference, JakePaul did something no one expected. He disappeared. No more tweets. No training clips. No podcast appearances. For a man who once lived in the spotlight, the silence was deafening. Fans started wondering if something was wrong. Some said he was over it. Others said the grandpa jokes got to him. But behind closed doors, Jake was preparing for something the world wasn't ready for. It started before sunrise. Every morning, while most of Los Angeles was still asleep, Jake was already in the gym. The air was thick with the sound of heavy gloves smacking leather, the rhythmic pounding of the jump rope, the echo of his footsteps as he moved around the ring. His coach, BJ Flores, watched quietly from the corner. Jake didn't speak much, just nodded, adjusted his gloves, and got back to work. He wasn't training for show. He wasn't chasing clout. He was on a mission, again, his coach said. Jake threw another combination, jab, cross, hook, body shot, pivot. Sweat poured down his face, but his eyes stayed cold, focused, sharp. The taunts of that young fighter echoed in his head. "He fights like a grandpa. He's too slow. He's finished." Each insult became fuel. Each round, a response. Days turned into weeks. While the challenger was busy making TikToks and interviews, Jake was buried in silence, pushing through pain, fatigue, and doubt. He stopped checking social media entirely. His team handled the noise. Jake's job was simple. Destroy the version of himself that people thought was done. The gym became his battlefield. Mornings were for endurance. Afternoons were for sparring. Evenings were for strategy and mental focus. "People think age is weakness," Jake said quietly one night, wrapping his hands before another late session. His coach looked up, "And what do you think?" Jake smiled slightly. "I think experience beats arrogance, every single time." Meanwhile, the challenger kept running his mouth online. He uploaded training videos, calling Jake's workouts old man drills. He laughed on live streams, mocking Jake's age again. I hope they got a rocking chair ready for him after the fight. Each post got millions of views, but Jake didn't bite. He knew, when someone talks too much, it's usually because they're scared. Still, the internet kept fueling the fire. Fans started making polls. Who's winning, the grandpa or the new era? Comments flooded in. "Jake's washed! This new guy's gonna knock him out easy. Jake doesn't stand a chance." But in a quiet, dimly lit gym in Puerto Rico, JakePaul just kept training. Faster, harder, smarter. Every punch had purpose. Every round had intent. His nutritionist noticed the change too. Jake wasn't joking around, wasn't distracted. He'd become surgical in his focus. No ego, no entourage, no drama, just discipline. At night, he'd sit alone reviewing fight tapes, studying his opponent's weaknesses, frame by frame, timing, patterns, mistakes. He knew exactly what the young fighter would do, and how he'd end it. His coach finally asked, "What's the goal for this fight?" Jake didn't hesitate. to teach him respect. 2 weeks before fight night, Jake finally broke his silence with a single message on X, Twitter. "You can call me Grandpa." But remember, even old lions still bite. The internet went insane. That one post gathered millions of likes and shares in hours. The challenger laughed it off, replying with, "Cool story, Grandpa. Hope you can make it to the ring without a cane." But deep down, everyone could feel the shift. Jake wasn't playing around. The countdown began. The press stopped seeing Jake as a washed-up YouTuber. They started calling him the Silent Storm. Because this time, Jake wasn't just fighting to win. He was fighting to prove something bigger. The challenger? Still talking, still joking. But those who really understand fighting, they could sense it. When a man stops talking and only trains, he's dangerous. If someone mocked you publicly like this, would you ignore it or come back stronger in silence like Jake did? Tell me in the comments. As the final week arrived, the world held its breath. The challenger was busy rehearsing his walkout routine, cameras flashing, ego at its peak. But JakePaul, he was in the shadows, sharpening his mind and body like a blade. He didn't want revenge. He wanted a reminder to the world that legends don't fade. They evolve, and when fight night came, that silence he'd kept for weeks, it was about to roar louder than any insult ever could. The arena lights dimmed, the crowd roared, and two men walked toward destiny. One filled with pride, the other filled with purpose. The bell was about to ring. The night had finally arrived. Las Vegas was electric. The streets glowed with neon lights and the entire world was tuned in. Every sports channel, every YouTube livestream, every fan forum, all talking about the same thing. Tonight, the new era faces the old guard. Can JakePaul survive the storm? The challenger strutted into the arena with his usual arrogance. Diamond chains, designer jacket, phone in hand, streaming live to his followers. "Watch me retire, Grandpa, tonight," he shouted to the camera. The crowd laughed, cheered, and booed in equal measure. He loved it. Every bit of attention fueled his ego. But when JakePaul's music hit, the energy shifted. Jake walked out slowly, wrapped in a simple black robe. No theatrics, no entourage, just focus. The crowd rose to their feet. Even those who came to hate watch couldn't help but feel the weight of his presence. Under the lights, Jake's face looked calm, not angry, not cocky, just ready. He touched gloves with his coach, whispered a quiet prayer, and stepped into the ring. The challenger, already bouncing in his corner, smirked. "You ready, Grandpa?" Jake didn't answer. He just stared. That cold, unblinking stare that fighters recognize instantly. It's the look of a man who's already made peace with pain. The bell rang. Round 1, the challenger came flying in, wild, fast, reckless. Left jab, right hook, overhand swing. Jake stayed defensive, reading, calculating. He wasn't rushing. He was learning. "Come on, old man. Show me something," the challenger shouted mid-round. Jake moved silently, letting the younger man waste energy. Every swing that missed made the crowd gasp. Jake's head movement was sharper than anyone expected. "He's not biting," said the commentator. "Jake's playing chess, while this kid's playing checkers." By the end of round 1, the challenger was breathing harder than he should have been. Jake, still calm, still quiet. Round 2, the challenger's confidence grew. He landed a few jabs, smiled, raised his hands to taunt Jake. The crowd loved it. Drama, energy, chaos. But then, something subtle changed. Jake's right hand twitched, once, twice. The rhythm shifted, pop! A stiff jab caught the challenger square on the nose. Then another. Then a body shot. The sound echoed through the arena. Thud. "Oh, JakePaul's starting to find his timing," shouted the commentator. For the first time, the challenger looked surprised. He stepped back, blinking, realizing the old man still had speed and precision. Round 3. The challenger tried to reassert control, but Jake had downloaded his entire game plan. Every feint, every habit, every tell. Jake started talking now, not trash, but truth. "You talk too much, kid. Pop. Now listen." Body shot. Hook. Counter jab. The crowd went wild. Every punch was a statement. Every movement, a lesson. Jake's timing was surgical, the kind that comes from experience, not youth. The challenger's corner screamed, "Move your head."
"Stay off the ropes!"
But it was too late. Jake had him where he wanted him, frustrated, flustered, and feeling the weight of his own words. By round 4, the arrogance had vanished. Sweat poured down the challenger's face. His fancy footwork slowed. His guard dropped, and then Jake did what legends do. He stayed patient. He didn't rush the knockout. He broke the man down piece by piece, left jab. Right cross, step back, counter hook. Each strike cleaner than the last. The crowd began to chant, "Jake! Jake! Jake!" Even those who doubted him were on their feet now. Midway through the round, Jake saw it. The perfect opening. The challenger swung wild again, desperate to land something big. Jake slipped to the left, pivoted on his back foot, and unleashed a devastating right hand. Crack! The sound echoed like a gunshot. The challenger hit the canvas. The entire arena erupted. Commentators screamed, "Down goes the kid!" JakePaul just shook the building. The referee began counting. 1, 2, 3. The young fighter struggled, blinking, trying to get up. But his legs were gone. His arrogance had left the building. Jake stepped back to his corner, calm, breathing steadily. He didn't celebrate. He didn't taunt. He just waited. The ref reached 10. It was over. The crowd exploded into cheers, disbelief, and respect. "The old lion still hunts," said the commentator. Jake walked over to the fallen challenger, helped him up, and said quietly, "Never disrespect those who came before you." Experience doesn't fade. It sharpens. The challenger nodded, humbled. The arena, once divided, now stood united in respect. Jake lifted his gloves. No shouting, no arrogance, just a quiet victory, the kind that speaks louder than any insult ever could. If you were in Jake's place, would you have helped your opponent up or just walked away after that knockout? Tell me in the comments. The camera zoomed in on Jake's face as the crowd chanted his name. For a moment, he looked directly into the lens, calm, powerful, unshaken. The man they mocked as Grandpa had just reminded the world. Legends never age, they evolve. Backstage, cameras caught Jake's reaction when reporters asked, "Did you expect to end it like that?" His answer stunned everyone. The fight was over, but the story had just begun. The crowd was still roaring, chanting Jake's name as the young challenger sat on the stool, dazed, his face a mix of pain and disbelief. Moments ago, he was mocking JakePaul, laughing, taunting, calling him Grandpa. Now, he could barely look him in the eye. Jake stood quietly in the center of the ring, gloves hanging loose at his sides. He wasn't celebrating like the others. He wasn't posing for cameras. He was breathing slow, controlled, like a man who'd already expected this moment. Reporters swarmed ringside. Flashes went off. Everyone wanted a piece of the story. The comeback, the knockout, the lesson. A reporter pushed forward with a microphone. "Jake, nobody expected this level of performance tonight. Did you know you'd end it this way?" Jake looked up, sweat still dripping down his face, eyes steady. "Yeah," he said calmly, "because I stopped fighting for attention and started fighting for purpose." The crowd erupted again. Even his critics stood and clapped. As the interviewer tried to speak again, Jake continued. "This fight wasn't about proving people wrong. It was about proving discipline never gets old. I've made mistakes, I've talked big, I've fallen. But I always get back up." He looked over at the young fighter being checked by the medical team. "That kid's got talent," Jake said. "He's fast, strong, hungry. I was him once. But sometimes you've got to learn the hard way that experience hits harder than hype." The crowd cheered louder, but Jake wasn't finished. He stepped toward the camera, speaking not just to the arena but to the millions watching online. To everyone out there chasing something, they're gonna laugh at you. They're gonna doubt you. But remember this, age doesn't define you. Work does. That line hit like another knockout. Twitter, YouTube, TikTok, all exploded instantly. Backstage, the mood was electric. Jake walked through a tunnel of flashing cameras and echoing applause. Reporters were yelling questions. "Jake, what do you want to say to your haters? Jake, are you retiring now? Jake, did you see the memes before the fight?" He stopped, turned, and with the calmest tone imaginable said, You can laugh at me. You can doubt me. But you can't outwork me. That clip alone went viral within minutes. Inside the locker room, his team erupted with joy. Hugs, shouts, high fives. But Jake stayed quiet again, just sat down, unwrapping his gloves slowly, staring at the floor. His coach approached him. You good? Jake smiled slightly. Yeah, just thinking about how far I've come. For a moment, he sat there in silence. Then he picked up his phone, notifications flooding in, millions of mentions, clips, and reactions, trending worldwide. Respect JakePaul, the grandpa lesson, legends don't age. But among the chaos, one message stood out. A DM from the same young fighter he'd just beaten. Respect, Jake. I learned more tonight than any fight in my life. Thanks for teaching me, not just how to fight, but how to lose right, Jake smiled. He replied with just one line, keep training. Humility is the first step to greatness. A few hours later, Jake joined the post-fight press conference. The hall was packed. Journalists from every country filled the room, cameras rolling, lights flashing, every word being streamed live. A reporter asked, Jake, you've gone from YouTuber to boxer, from loud talker to silent worker. What changed? Jake leaned forward, elbows on the table. What changed? I stopped chasing validation. I started chasing mastery. He paused. People laughed when I started boxing. They called me fake, said I'd never last. But I learned, no matter what they say, discipline outlasts doubt. That quote hit social media like wildfire. Every motivation page reposted it. Every fan clip used it. JakePaul, the same guy once seen as a loudmouth influencer, had become a symbol of persistence and redemption. Then came the emotional moment. A reporter asked softly, Jake, do you have any message for the younger generation watching tonight? Jake nodded slowly, looked straight into the lens. Yeah. Don't waste time proving your worth to people who don't see it. Build yourself quietly. Let results talk. I used to run my mouth. Now I let my gloves do it for me. The entire room fell silent. Even the reporters, usually chaotic, were still. Jake stood, shook hands with the panel, and walked out without another word. No arrogance, no boast. Just respect. Have you ever been underestimated and proved everyone wrong like Jake did? Tell me your story in the comments. Outside the arena, thousands of fans waited, chanting his name as he stepped into his car. His team cheered, but Jake just looked out the window, the Vegas lights reflecting in his eyes. For him, it wasn't about fame anymore. It was about legacy. The same people who called him Grandpa were now calling him champion, and that was the real victory. The next morning, Jake woke up to something even he didn't expect, a message from one of boxing's greatest legends. What it said left him speechless. The night after the fight, the world couldn't stop talking. Clips of Jake's knockout flooded every platform imaginable. Twitter, YouTube Shorts, TikTok, Instagram Reels, you name it. Every angle, every slow-motion replay, every quote Jake said was on fire. The same reporters who mocked him a week ago were now praising him. The most mature, composed version of JakePaul we've ever seen. He didn't just win the fight, he won the world's respect. For once, there were no memes, no hate comments, just admiration. People saw something different this time. By sunrise, Jake's phone was blowing up. Hundreds of unread messages, calls from journalists, sponsors, old friends, even rivals. But one message stood out. It came from an unknown number, but with a name he instantly recognized. This is Mike Tyson. You made me proud tonight. Jake froze, staring at the screen. He read it again just to make sure he wasn't dreaming. Tyson, the legend, the icon of power and respect, had just texted him. Moments later, his phone rang. It was FaceTime. Jake hesitated, then picked up. The screen filled with that unmistakable face. Iron Mike himself smiling. Jake, Tyson said, his voice deep and calm. You did something special last night, kid. Jake blinked, speechless. Wow. Mike, that means everything, man. I grew up watching you, Tyson chuckled. Yeah, well, I watched you too. Loud kid, wild energy, always talking. He grinned. But last night, you shut everybody up the right way. Jake laughed, shaking his head. Guess I finally learned when to stop talking. Tyson nodded. That's growth. You didn't win because you were younger or stronger. You won because you fought with patience. That's the mark of a real fighter. After the call ended, Jake sat quietly for a long time. No noise, no chaos, just reflection. He thought about the journey, from YouTube skits to boxing arenas. From internet hate to worldwide headlines. From arrogance to respect, he'd been mocked, doubted, insulted, and labeled a fake fighter. But now, the world was finally seeing him for what he'd become, a student of the game. Later that morning, he stepped outside his house in Puerto Rico. The sun was rising, waves crashing softly nearby. No cameras, no lights, just peace. His coach joined him with coffee in hand. You realize what you did, right? Jake shrugged. Want to fight? The coach smiled. Nah, you won hearts, man. You turned the internet from your biggest critic into your biggest fan. Jake chuckled. Didn't think I'd ever see that day. They both laughed. That relaxed. Genuine laugh of people who know they've been through hell and come out clean on the other side. Meanwhile, social media continued to explode. Celebrities, athletes, and fans from every country were posting about Jake. Tweets like, from clown to champion. Respect, JakePaul. That knockout wasn't just physical, it was poetic. He didn't prove the haters wrong. He proved discipline always wins. Even the young challenger posted something that shocked everyone. I disrespected a man who earned his legacy. Last night he taught me more about respect than any fight ever could. Thank you, JakePaul. That single post went insanely viral. Over 10 million likes in less than 24 hours. And suddenly, the narrative wasn't about rivalry anymore. It was about redemption, humility, and growth. Jake's PR manager called him later that afternoon. You're trending in 42 countries, she said, barely containing excitement. You're on every news outlet, every talk show. Even CNN just ran a headline calling you the silent fighter. Jake smiled faintly. Funny how silence can be louder than words. Then she added, there's one more thing. Tyson's team wants you to come train with him. He said he sees something in you, a spark he hasn't seen in years. Jake's eyes widened. You're kidding. Nope, he said. And I quote, I want to teach that kid how to finish careers. Not just fights. Jake leaned back, stunned. For once, he didn't have a comeback, just gratitude. That evening, Jake went live on Instagram. Over 2 million people joined instantly. He didn't scream. He didn't brag. He just spoke from the heart. I want to thank everyone, even the ones who doubted me. You all gave me the reason to evolve. This fight wasn't about proving I'm the best. It was about showing that no matter how many times you fall, you can always rise again with purpose. He paused, then smiled. They called me Grandpa. But you know what? Maybe that's not an insult anymore. Maybe it's a compliment. Because real strength isn't in age. It's in endurance. The comments exploded with emojis. Fans from all over the world dropped the same word, respect. If life ever counted you out, and you came back stronger, drop it in the comments. Let's see how many fighters we've got watching tonight. Jake closed the live stream, set his phone down, and walked outside again. The night sky above Puerto Rico was calm. Stars scattered across the darkness, waves still whispering against the shore. He took a deep breath, smiled, and whispered to himself, let them talk. I'll just keep working. The legend had spoken. The student had listened, and the world had learned. Never mistake silence for weakness. Because real lions don't roar until it's time to hunt. It had been 3 days since the knockout heard around the world. The internet was still buzzing. Clips, quotes, and memes, all celebrating Jake's transformation from the loud YouTuber everyone loved to hate, to the calm, disciplined fighter everyone now respected. But while the world couldn't stop talking, Jake had gone quiet again. No interviews, no appearances, just recovery, reflection, and peace. He'd made his statement, not with words, but with action. Then, one morning, his phone buzzed again. It was an unfamiliar number. He answered. Jake, this is ESPN Sports. Jake sat up. Yeah, this is Jake, the voice continued. We're organizing a new documentary series, Legacy Fighters. It's about athletes who changed the game through heart, not hype. and we want you to be our main feature." For a few seconds, Jake didn't speak. He was used to deals, sponsorships, and offers. But this one felt different. "Why me?" he asked softly. The producer replied, "Because you reminded the world that redemption is louder than arrogance." "You turned criticism into character," Jake smiled quietly. That was all he needed to hear. A week later, filming began. No scripted lines, no fake drama, just real footage. His early YouTube clips, the controversies, the comebacks, the late-night training sessions. They captured everything. The noise, the fall, the rise. And through it all, Jake spoke with honesty. No filters, no ego. "I used to fight for attention," he said into the camera. "Now I fight for purpose, for everyone who's ever been laughed at, doubted, or dismissed." The documentary trailer dropped online. Within hours, 20 million views. Fans flooded the comments. From clown to champion. He didn't change overnight. He evolved. This isn't a comeback story. It's a growth story. Jake scrolled through the reactions, smiling. He wasn't proud because people loved him. He was proud because people understood him. That night, Jake sat alone by the ocean. The same spot where he'd trained in silence before the fight. The waves rolled in, soft and rhythmic. The moonlight shimmered across the water. He thought about everything. The insults, the lessons, the people who doubted him, and the ones who stood by him anyway. Then he pulled out his phone and tweeted one last message. "They called me Grandpa. I called it experience. Respect your journey, no matter how long it takes." Within minutes, the tweet went viral. Not because of fame, but because of truth. The next morning, ESPN released the final scene of the documentary. It showed Jake walking out of the gym, wrapping his hands slowly, as Tyson's voice narrated in the background. "Real fighters don't fight for the crowd. They fight for peace of mind." And Jake, he found his. If you believe that growth takes time and that respect is earned, not given, type respect in the comments. And remember, the loudest roar always comes from the calmest lion. As the screen faded to black, one final quote appeared. "Legends aren't born, they're built in silence." And that was the end of the story. The man once mocked as Grandpa had become something greater. A reminder that in a world full of noise, discipline and humility will always speak loudest.